The fact that anything exists at all automatically puts existence into a relationship with non-existence. Existence versus non-existence is the foundation of logic. Logic is the proposition, a thing is what it is and is not what it is not. Aristotle put it formally as A is not non-A at the same time and in the same relationship. A tree is a tree and is not a non-tree. It is not a dog, a fish or a cloud. That statement is both reality and logic at the same time. This basic law of logic is known as the law of non-contradictions. The law of non-contradictions validates itself. When we apply it to reality, we see that a tree really is a tree and not a dog or a cloud. Thus logic validates itself by reality and by the impossibility to think at all without it. Therefore, logic is self-validating. Reality itself produces the basic law of logic, not the mind. There is a difference between reality and mind. The basic law of logic exists independently of mind for the same reason a star exists in the absence of a mind to perceive it. We must keep it constantly clear that reality itself produces the basic law of logic, not the mind. Try thinking a single thought without logic. The mere existence of the thought puts it in relationship with non-thought. This automatically involves the law of non-contradictions. We may sometimes hear that logic is invented. The obvious question is, was everything illogical before its invention? No. Logic was just simply expressed in comprehensible terms. Logic cannot be validated outside of itself because one must use logic itself to do so. We use logic to come to truth. If there existed any other means of coming to the truth, then by definition it would be a non-logical or illogical means. It makes no sense, therefore, to assert that any other means could possibly exist for proving any truth whatsoever than logic itself. Reason is the relative ability to manipulate correctly the laws of logic to arrive at valid conclusions. While the laws of logic are absolute, our ability to use them are not. This skill varies from person to person. We all make logic errors. This is not the fault of logic. It is a fault in our abilities. An argument is valid when its form is correct. It is possible for an argument to be valid but untrue. It is also possible for the conclusion of an invalid argument to be perfectly true as well. There are three laws of logic. There may be other laws that have yet to be expressed, but the three laws that have been identified are: firstly, the law of identity. That is the statement P is the same thing as itself and it's different from everything else. Secondly, the law of non-contradiction. That is a statement cannot be both true and false. And thirdly, the law of the excluded middle. That in a two-value system, with true and false, a statement is either true or false. A third possibility is excluded. The characteristics of these three laws of logic are that they are invariable, omnipresent and absolute. Invariable means not variable, not changing or capable of being changed. For example, a tree will always be a tree and never not itself. Omnipresent means being present in all places at all times. For example, the laws will be the same no matter where you are on Earth or on other planets in the universe. A tree does not turn into a dog just because you are in Australia or on the moon. Absolute means not to be doubted or questioned. That is certainty. For example, it is for certain that a tree is always a tree and never a dog or anything else. From these laws of logic we derive logical arguments. There are two forms of logical arguments, and they are inductive and deductive. The deductive argument tries to prove that the conclusion is certainly true. The argument can be valid, which means that the conclusion is necessarily true, given the premises. Valid can be unsound, which means at least one premise is false, or it can be sound, which means all premises are true. The argument can be invalid, which means that the conclusion is not necessarily true, given the premises. So for example, if premise 1 states all mammals have kidneys and premise 2 states all dogs are mammals, the conclusion 3 therefore is all dogs have kidneys. If premise 1 and 2 are true, then so must conclusion 3 be true. So, this argument is valid. The argument is also sound. A sound argument is a valid argument that has true premises, and thus the conclusion must also be true. The inductive argument tries to imply that the conclusion is probably true. The argument can be strong, which means that the conclusion is highly probable, given the premise. Strong can be cogent, which means that all premises are true, or it can be uncogent, which means at least one premise is true. The argument can be weak, which means that the conclusion is not highly probable, given the premises. For example, given the statement, practice makes perfect. Doctors practice medicine. Therefore, doctors must be perfect. The conclusion is not highly probable, given the premises, so the argument is weak. Informal logic does not use symbols, it uses ordinary language. Fallacies are associated with informal logic. These are also called ordinary language fallacies. There are three broad categories of fallacies associated with ordinary language. These are fallacies of ambiguity, fallacies of presumption, and fallacies of relevance. The fallacy of equivocation falls under the fallacies of ambiguity. For example, the statement "practice makes perfect." Doctors practice medicine. Therefore, doctors must be perfect, is an example of the equivocation fallacy. Here the word practice is used in two different ways, and so the argument is fallacious. You should not presume that because a claim has been poorly argued or a fallacy has been made, that it is necessarily wrong. It is a fallacy called the fallacy. The goal is not to win an argument, but to justify your reasoning and lay the foundation to find truth.